Good evening, I'm Jonathan Graves, and you've found your way to Archive X. Tonight we set out on a journey across the United States, from the deserts to the swamps, from the mountains to the cities. In every state there is a story, a local legend. Some are famous, and others infamous. These are tales whispered on front porches, and told in hushed voices by dying campfires. I've gathered a story from each state here for you, legends of spirits, monsters, and mysteries. Some call them folklore, others call them truth. What I can promise is that the shadows always hide more than you think. So settle in and let the shadows of these stories keep you company. Let's begin. We start in Alabama and what the locals call Hell's Gate Bridge, a small, unassuming span of concrete and steel just outside the town of Oxford, Alabama. By daylight, it looks like any other back road crossing, the kind of place you'd barely notice as you drove over. But at night, the bridge becomes something else entirely. The legend begins in the 1950s. A young couple, so the story goes, was driving across the bridge late one evening, for reasons no one remembers, or no one dares to say. Their car broke through the railing and plunged into the waters below. They were never seen alive again. Since then, the bridge has carried a reputation darker than the water it rests above. Locals whisper that if you stop your car in the middle of the bridge and turn off your headlights, something will join you. Sometimes it's the sound of splashing, as though the accident is happening again. Other times, it's the figure of the drowned lovers themselves, silently taking their seats in the back of your car, dripping wet, waiting to be carried to the other side. The most chilling version of the tale, though, is the one that gave the bridge its name. They say that if you stop in the center and look into your rearview mirror, you will not see the road behind you. Instead, you'll see the fiery gates of hell itself, stretching open, as though the accident that claimed the couple's lives tore a hole in the world that never quite healed. Now, whether the story is true depends on who you ask. Some say it's a warning, a way for parents to keep their children from cruising recklessly across dangerous country roads at night. Others swear they've felt the presence, seen the glow, or heard voices on that bridge when no one else was around. The town eventually closed Hell's Gate Bridge to traffic, partly because of safety concerns, and partly because the legend was drawing in too many curious thrill seekers, but that hasn't stopped the stories. If anything, the silence of the abandoned bridge has only made them louder. And here's the thing about legends like this. Alabama may claim Hell's Gate Bridge, but the story is not unique. From Texas to Kentucky, from Ohio to New Jersey, bridges across the country have their own tales of ghostly hitchhikers, spectral lovers, and phantom accidents that play out over and over again. It seems, wherever there is a dark stretch of water and a lonely bridge, the human imagination fills in the rest. Still, if you ever find yourself near Oxford on a moonless night, and curiosity tempts you to step onto the cracked pavement of Hell's Gate Bridge, remember the warning. Don't look in the mirror too long. Don't leave your lights off for more than a breath. And if you hear the sound of water rushing beneath you when the river runs dry, well, I suggest you leave before a new chapter in the legend of Hell's Gate Bridge is written. Next, we go to Alaska and the Kushtaka of the Tlingit. In the frozen wilderness of Alaska, danger hides in many forms. The cold can kill you. The rivers can sweep you away, and the mountains can leave you lost forever. But according to the Tlingit people, there is another danger, one that does not come from nature itself, but from the creatures that dwell within it. They call them the Kushtaka. The name means land otter man, and that is exactly what they are said to be, shapeshifters, able to appear as otters, as men, or something caught in between. To the unsuspecting, they might look like a lost child, crying in the woods, or a friend calling your name from the riverbank. But once you draw close enough, the Kushtaka reveals its true nature. According to legend, the Kushtaka delight in luring travelers to their deaths. They wait near the water, imitating human voices, sometimes even the cries of infants. Those who follow are led to the edge of the river and then dragged beneath the surface. Some stories say they tear their victims apart, feasting on the remains. Others say the Kushtaka transform their prey into more of their kind, forever trapping the soul in a half-human, half-animal form. Not every tale is so grim. In some Tlingit traditions, the Kushtaka can save a person from freezing by transforming them, sparing them from death at the cost of their humanity. But the line between salvation and damnation is thin, and the Kushtaka are never to be trusted. Even today, sightings continue. Fishermen along the coast speak of strange cries in the fog, pulling them toward dangerous waters. Hikers deep in the Tongass National Forest claim to see figures watching them, shapes that melt away into the trees when approached. And in the small villages of southeast Alaska, the old stories are not forgotten. Parents warn their children not to wander alone near rivers, especially at night. Skeptics say the Kushtaka are nothing more than folklore, a way to explain drownings and disappearances in a harsh, unforgiving land. Yet the legend persists. Maybe it's because Alaska, with its endless forests and uncharted wilderness, feels like the kind of place where something like the Kushtaka could still exist, just out of sight, waiting. So if you ever find yourself in the Alaskan wilds, with the mist curling low over the water and the sound of crying echoing through the trees, remember this: not every voice you hear should be followed, and not every lost soul is looking to be saved. In the dry desert hills outside of Kingman, Arizona, there lies a place known to locals as Slaughterhouse Canyon. The name alone suggests blood and violence, and the story that gave it life is as tragic as it is chilling. The tale begins in the 1800s, during the days of the gold rush. A family lived in the canyon, a husband, a wife, and their children. They were poor, like so many who sought fortune in the unforgiving desert, but they managed to survive on what little they could find. The father would leave for weeks at a time, searching for gold, while his family waited at home, hoping he would return with enough to feed them. But one journey lasted too long. The food ran out, and hunger set in. Days turned into weeks, and still the father did not return. The children cried out for food, their voices echoing against the canyon walls. But there was nothing to give. Desperation took hold of their mother, and in that despair, she lost her mind. They say she put on her wedding dress, now tattered and torn, and in a frenzy murdered her children. Some say she chopped them to pieces, others that she simply left them to starve. But when it was done, she carried their remains to the river, cast them into the waters, and wailed until her voice broke. Then she too succumbed to starvation. Her screams never left the canyon. To this day, those who wander there at night claim to hear them. The wails of a mother driven mad by hunger, echoing through the rocks. Some say they've seen her, still wearing her blood-stained wedding dress, drifting along the riverbed, forever searching for her children. Of course, skeptics will tell you it's just a story, a campfire tale meant to frighten children away from wandering too far into the desert. And yet, the canyon holds a weight to it. An oppressive silence that seems to wait for darkness before breaking into sound. Legends like this are not unique to Arizona. Across America, you'll find tales of the weeping woman, a mother who lost her children, doomed to haunt the earth in grief. In the Southwest, she's known as La Llorona. In the canyons of Arizona, she is the bride of Slaughterhouse Canyon. So if you find yourself wandering those lonely desert paths near Kingman, and the night grows quiet, listen carefully. If you hear the sound of crying on the wind, turn back. Because in Slaughterhouse Canyon, some mothers never stop weeping. Deep in the swamps and bottomlands of southern Arkansas, near the small town of Fouke, there lives a legend. The locals call it the Fouke Monster. Outsiders know it as the Boggy Creek Creature. But whatever name you choose, it has terrified this region for generations. Descriptions vary, but most agree. The Fouke monster is tall, hairy, and covered in a dark, shaggy coat, standing anywhere from 7 to 10 feet in height, with long arms and glowing red eyes. It walks on 2 legs like a man, but leaves tracks far too large to belong to any human. Some say it reeks of a foul odor, like death and swamp water, warning of its presence long before it can be seen. The first major sighting dates back to 1971, when a family reported a violent encounter at their rural home. They claimed the creature tried to force its way inside, reaching through a window before fleeing back into the night. The story spread quickly, fueled by frightened witnesses and curious reporters. Soon, hunters, thrill seekers, and cryptid enthusiasts descended upon Fouke, hoping for a glimpse. In the years that followed, dozens of sightings poured in. Some saw the creature crossing country roads in the dead of night, its glowing eyes fixed on passing cars. Others swore they heard it howling in the swamp, a sound that chilled the blood. Farmers blamed it for missing livestock, for strange tracks in the mud, and for eyes watching them from the tree line. The legend became so notorious it inspired a film in 1972, The Legend of Boggy Creek. Half documentary, half dramatization, the movie introduced the Fouke monster to the world. And though skeptics dismissed it as folklore, the film only made the creature more real to the people of Arkansas. To this day, sightings continue. Some say it's nothing more than a misidentified bear. Others believe it is a relic from the past, a surviving species of ape, hiding in the swamps. But ask the locals, and many will tell you the same thing. There's something out there. Something that doesn't want to be found. Of course, Arkansas is not alone in its monster stories. From Bigfoot in the Pacific Northwest to Momo in Missouri, the woods of America seem to harbor secrets we cannot explain. The Fouke monster simply claims its place among them, a southern cousin in the family of giants. So if you find yourself driving through Fouke, Arkansas, on a misty summer night, keep your windows rolled up. And if you see glowing red eyes staring back at you from the tree line, don't stop the car. Along the rugged ridges of California's Santa Lucia Mountains, there are watchers, silent, still, and endlessly patient. The locals call them the Dark Watchers. They are said to be tall, shadow-like figures, standing at the edge of cliffs, gazing out over the valleys and canyons below. Some describe them as giants, cloaked and faceless, their outlines shimmering faintly against the setting sun. They never move. They never speak. They simply watch. The Chumash people, who have lived in these mountains for centuries, told stories of them long before European settlers arrived. According to legend, the Watchers are spirits of the land, guardians perhaps, or omens. To see one was to know you were being observed by forces far older than yourself. But the Spanish explorers who came later had their own encounters. They wrote of looming silhouettes that appeared at twilight, only to vanish as soon as they were approached. Ranchers in the 1800s reported the same. Even the famous writer John Steinbeck mentioned the Watchers in his stories, describing them as mysterious companions on long mountain walks. Hikers today still speak of them. A sudden feeling of being followed. A figure glimpsed on a ridge, standing impossibly still. Some say when they raised a hand to wave, the Watcher raised a hand in return. before dissolving into thin air. Skeptics, of course, dismiss the sightings as tricks of light and shadow. The long California sunsets can stretch a hiker's shadow to towering proportions. Add exhaustion, isolation, and the eerie silence of the mountains, and perhaps the dark watchers are nothing more than illusions born in the mind. But then again, illusions don't stare back. The Dark Watchers belong to a larger family of legends. Across the world, cultures tell of shadowy beings who appear just at the edge of vision. From the shadow people of modern folklore, to the jinn of the Middle East, to the hooded spirits of Celtic myth. They watch, but they rarely act, leaving us to wonder. What do they want? So, if you ever find yourself in the Santa Lucia Mountains at dusk, with the light fading and the air turning cold, look up to the ridges. You may see them standing there, silent and motionless, gazing down upon you. And if you do, my advice is simple. Do not stare too long. Because sometimes, when you notice the watchers, they notice you back. In the mountain town of Glenwood Springs, nestled against the Rockies in Colorado, stands a grand old building known as the Hotel Colorado. By day, it is a picture of elegance, its stone walls and ornate halls speaking of a bygone era of wealth and opulence. But when the sun sets, the hotel tells a different story. A darker one. The Hotel Colorado was built in 1893, a lavish getaway for the rich and powerful. Over the years, it hosted presidents, gangsters, and celebrities. Teddy Roosevelt himself once stayed here, as did William Howard Taft. Its reputation was that of a mountain paradise. But during times of war, paradise can be a fragile thing. When World War II came, the hotel was converted into a makeshift hospital. Soldiers wounded in battle were brought to Glenwood Springs to recover within its walls. Some healed, but many did not. Their pain, their suffering, and their final breaths left an imprint that lingers still. Guests and staff alike report strange happenings. Lights flicker on their own. Phones ring with no one on the other end. The smell of cigar smoke drifts through the corridors, even when no one is smoking. And in certain rooms, the sound of a woman crying can be heard, faint and distant, as if echoing up from the basement. The most infamous story involves the old incinerator in the lower levels. During the war years, when soldiers passed away, their bodies were sometimes cremated on site. Today, visitors say the room is heavy with unease, and those who dare to enter feel watched from the shadows. Some even claim to hear the sound of moaning, as if the fires are still burning. But not all of the spirits are sorrowful. The hotel has its playful ghosts as well. Children's laughter drifts through the hallways. Footsteps patter where no one is walking, and objects are moved from place to place as if by unseen hands. One spirit, known simply as the Lady in White, has been seen gliding across the lobby, her presence silent but undeniable. Skeptics say it is all imagination, the product of old walls creaking, pipes groaning, and the mind filling in the rest. But those who have stayed the night tell a different tale. Even hardened skeptics admit the hotel feels alive in a way few places do, as though it remembers everything that has passed within its walls. And of course, the Hotel Colorado is not alone. America is filled with haunted hotels. The Stanley in Estes Park, the Queen Mary in Long Beach, the Crescent in Eureka Springs. But in Glenwood Springs, the Hotel Colorado keeps its own watch over the living and the dead. So if you ever check in, enjoy the elegance, the history, the beauty of the Rocky Mountains. But when night falls and the hallways grow quiet, listen closely. You may hear footsteps that are not your own, or the faint ring of a phone that no one has called in decades. In the quiet woods of eastern Connecticut, there is a lonely stretch of road known as Route 59. To most, it's nothing more than a winding two-lane path through the countryside. But to those who travel it late at night, it is home to one of New England's most enduring phantoms, the White Lady of Easton. She is described as pale, almost glowing, clothed in a long white gown. Her face is young but sorrowful, and her presence chills the air around her. Drivers say she appears suddenly along the roadside, as if out of nowhere. Some have even claimed to strike her with their cars, only to find the vehicle passes straight through, leaving nothing but the lingering shock of what they've seen. The stories date back generations. Some believe she was a bride-to-be, killed in an accident on her wedding day, doomed to walk the earth in the gown she never wore down the aisle. Others say she was a mother who lost her child, and now wanders the night searching endlessly, unable to rest. Still others whisper she was murdered long ago, her spirit caught between justice and revenge. The most famous witness may be a local police officer who, in the 1990s, reported seeing the White Lady firsthand. He described her stepping directly in front of his patrol car, illuminated by headlights. He braked hard, certain he had struck a woman. But when he leapt from the vehicle, there was no body, no footprints, and no trace of anyone on the road. His fellow officers knew him as a skeptic, not a man prone to ghost stories. Yet his account was unwavering. Even today, reports continue. Motorists describe sudden cold spots, or the brief glimpse of a figure in white at the edge of their high beams. Those who've seen her often speak of an overwhelming sadness, a sense of loss that clings long after the encounter. Of course, Connecticut is not alone in its tales of a white lady. From Hawaii to Ireland, from South Carolina to the Philippines, nearly every culture has its own version of this spectral woman in white. She may appear as a grieving mother, a betrayed lover, or a restless bride. But in every story, she is a figure of tragedy, tied to the places where she died. So if you are ever driving through Easton on a foggy night, keep your eyes on the roadside. If you see a pale figure in white, do not stop. Do not open your door. And whatever you do, don't look too long into her sorrowful face. Because some travelers say, if you meet her eyes, she just might follow you home. In the great cypress swamp of southern Delaware, where the trees grow thick and the ground sinks into waterlogged earth, there are stories of something that doesn't belong. The locals call it the Selbyville swamp monster. The legend first rose to prominence in the 1920s, when a man named Ralph Grapperhaus, the town newspaper editor, admitted to dressing as a creature and haunting the swamp to keep people out. He wore a suit of furs, carried a stick, and prowled the wetlands at night, scaring off hunters and travelers alike. For years the prank became town lore, a mischievous tale of a man playing monster. But the legend didn't die with the joke. Instead, it grew. Even after Grapperhaus confessed, people continued to report strange encounters in the swamp. Hunters claimed they saw a tall, hairy figure moving silently among the trees. Drivers at night spoke of glowing eyes reflecting from the brush, eyes too high off the ground to belong to any animal they knew. Others heard screams echoing through the swamp, sounds like no bird, no fox, no human could make. The creature, they say, is large and humanoid, covered in coarse dark hair, smelling of rot and musk. Some compare it to Bigfoot, others to a demon. But the Selbyville swamp monster has its own reputation, tied deeply to the land itself. The Great Cypress Swamp has always been a place of mystery. For centuries it has swallowed fires, floods, and even entire communities. Stories of strange lights, unnatural silence, and ghostly apparitions abound. Perhaps the swamp is simply fertile ground for legends to grow, or perhaps something truly does dwell there, watching from the shadows. What makes the Selbyville monster fascinating is how its story mirrors those from around the world. In Arkansas, they speak of the Fouke monster. In Florida, the skunk ape. In Ohio, the grass man. Each one a towering, hairy beast, half man, half animal, tied to wild, inhospitable land. Are these just regional variations of the same myth, or do they point to something more? Something that has followed humanity into every forest, every swamp, every place where civilization gives way to wilderness. Today, few dare to wander deep into the Great Cypress Swamp at night. The trees close in, the ground shifts underfoot, and the silence becomes unbearable. And if you find yourself there, with the mist curling low and the water lapping at your boots, remember this: some things wear fur not for warmth, but for disguise. In the small town of Cassadaga, Florida, a place long known as the psychic capital of the world, there sits a graveyard. It looks like any other at first glance, with weathered headstones and aging trees swaying in the heat. But hidden among the graves is something unusual: a large stone chair. They call it the Devil's Chair. At a glance, it seems harmless enough. Just a sturdy brick seat, built into the cemetery grounds, perhaps meant for mourners to sit while visiting loved ones. But the stories say otherwise. The locals claim the chair is no place for the living. The legend goes that if you sit in the Devil's Chair at midnight, the devil himself will appear. Some say he whispers in your ear, promising secrets or offering bargains you would be wise to refuse. Others say he doesn't need to appear at all. You'll feel his presence the moment you sit, as a cold weight pressing against your chest, making it hard to breathe. There are other stories too. Leave a can of beer on the chair overnight, and by morning it will be empty, but unopened, as if something invisible has drunk it without breaking the seal. Skeptics say it's nothing more than a town prank, a bit of mischief to spook visitors. But believers insist the devil claims what is left for him. The chair has become such a part of local lore that even those who don't believe avoid it. Visitors come to the cemetery, drawn by curiosity, but few are willing to test the story for themselves. Even in daylight, the seat has a certain gravity, an unsettling sense that it's waiting for someone brave or foolish enough to take a seat. Of course, the Devil's Chair is not unique to Florida. Across the country, other cemeteries tell similar tales. Chairs for the devil appear in Iowa, in Missouri, in Illinois. Some say they're just practical stone seats built for mourners. But folklore has a way of reshaping the ordinary into something ominous. And perhaps the idea of a place where the devil himself might sit among the dead is simply too compelling to resist. Still, there is something about Cassadaga that makes this chair feel different. A town filled with mediums, spiritualists, and seekers of the otherworldly. It seems a fitting place for such a legend to take root. Whether it is a trick of the imagination or something darker, the Devil's Chair endures as one of Florida's most infamous haunts. Some say the devil doesn't need an invitation, just a place to sit. And in Cassadaga, he may have already been given one. In the hills of northern Georgia lies a lake with a dark reputation. By daylight, Lake Lanier looks like paradise. Blue waters stretching across the horizon, boats skimming the surface, families swimming along its shores. But beneath those calm waves there is another story. A story of death, of restless spirits, and of a place many believe to be cursed. Lake Lanier was not always there. In the 1950s, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers built a dam and flooded the valleys of several small communities. Farmland, houses, roads, even cemeteries disappeared beneath the rising waters. Entire towns were left to drown, their remains still resting on the lakebed to this day. Since then, the lake has been marked by tragedy. More than 600 people have died in its waters. Boating accidents, drownings, collisions that defy explanation. Locals say the dead do not rest easily. Swimmers report hands grabbing at their ankles, pulling them under. Divers speak of murky depths where trees still stand, their branches reaching upward like skeletal fingers. And some claim to have seen the spirits themselves, ghostly figures drifting across the surface before vanishing into the mist. One of the most enduring tales is that of the Lady of the Lake. In 1958, 2 women drowned after their car veered off a bridge into the water. The wreck wasn't found for decades, but ever since, people have reported seeing a pale woman in a blue dress wandering the shoreline, her face hidden, her presence cold. Many believe she is still searching for her way home. Skeptics call it coincidence, a dangerous lake built on unstable ground, overcrowded with boats and swimmers. But others see the pattern. Too many deaths, too much grief. A lake that should have brought prosperity instead became a graveyard. And it's not the only one. Around the world, when lakes are built on top of what came before, legends rise. Reservoirs in China, in Africa, even in America's own Hoover Dam, all carry whispers of towns lost and spirits that refuse to leave. Perhaps Lake Lanier is simply the loudest of these stories, because its waters have swallowed so much. Today, Lake Lanier remains a popular destination, drawing millions of visitors each year. They swim, they sail, they laugh. But underneath, the ruins of old communities still wait in silence. And if the stories are true, so do the dead. Some lakes reflect the sky above, others reflect the past. And Lake Lanier, it seems, does both. On the islands of Hawaii, the night belongs to the living and the dead. Among the most feared and respected spirits in Hawaiian lore are the night marchers, spectral warriors said to roam the land after sunset, bound to an eternal procession. They are called Huaka'i, the spirits of ancient Hawaiian fighters, chiefs, and kings. When they march, they do so with the full force of a ghostly army. Drums pounding, torches blazing, conch shells blowing across the dark. The sound is said to carry through the valleys and down the beaches, a warning to all who hear it. Witnesses describe long lines of figures in traditional Hawaiian battle dress, carrying spears, cloaked in feathered capes. Their faces are fierce, their eyes glowing, their steps leaving no mark on the earth. And though they march in silence, The ground itself seems to tremble with their passing. To see the night marchers is dangerous. According to legend, no mortal should cross their path. Those who do may be struck down, their souls ripped from their bodies and forced to march forever alongside the spirits. The only protection, it is said, is to show respect. Lie face down on the ground, eyes averted, until the procession is past. In some traditions, those who carry Hawaiian bloodline to the chiefs may be spared, recognized as kin by the warriors of old. But the night marchers are not random. They follow specific paths, ancient trails that once connected sacred sites, battlefields, and burial grounds. Many of these routes still cross the islands today. Houses, schools, and even modern hotels have been built upon them. And those unlucky enough to live along these paths sometimes wake to the sound of drums in the distance, growing louder and closer with every beat. Skeptics say it is nothing more than the imagination, fueled by Hawaii's deep respect for its traditions and ancestors. Others point to the wind, the surf, and the rustle of trees, natural sounds mistaken for something more. But to the Hawaiian people, the night marchers are not a story to question. They are a reminder of the sacred past and the power it still holds. Similar tales echo across the world. Phantom armies march in England. Ghostly battalions ride in the forests of Scandinavia. In every culture, warriors who fell in battle refuse to rest. In Hawaii, they march to honor the chiefs they once served. If you find yourself on the islands at night, and you hear the sound of drums carried on the wind, do not look for the source. Do not stand in curiosity. Respect the land, bow your head, and let them pass. Because in Hawaii, the dead still march, and they march with purpose. On the banks of the Snake River in southern Idaho lies a place known as Massacre Rocks. The name itself carries tragedy, and the legends that surround it are no less grim. Among them is one of Idaho's darkest tales, the water babies of Massacre Rocks. The story reaches back to the mid-1800s, when settlers pushed westward along the Oregon Trail. Life was brutal. Starvation, disease, and exhaustion claimed countless lives before their journeys were ever complete. And for some families, desperation led to choices almost too terrible to imagine. According to legend, when food ran out and survival seemed impossible, mothers drowned their own infants in the Snake River. They believed it was a mercy, sparing the children from suffering, from hunger, from the slow death that awaited them on land. But mercy, once twisted into violence, rarely brings peace. They say the spirits of those children never left the water. Travelers along the river report hearing the sound of babies crying, their wails drifting through the night. Some say the cries are meant to lure the living into the current, where the water babies drag them beneath the surface. Others claim they've seen small hands reaching from the waves, pale and cold, before vanishing again into the depths. In some versions of the story, the water babies are not simply ghosts. They have changed, grown into malicious spirits, their tiny bodies warped by rage, their laughter sharp and cruel. Fishermen tell of shadows moving under their boats, too small to be fish, too quick to be caught. And once in a while, something tugs at the line or rocks the boat, as though reminding them the river has never forgotten. Skeptics dismiss it all as folklore, a way to explain the tragic deaths and drownings that still occur along the Snake River. After all, rivers are dangerous by nature, and their currents claim lives every year. But those who have heard the cries swear it is no trick of water or wind. The sound, they say, is unmistakable, and the tale is not unique to Idaho. Across the American West, stories of drowned children echo again and again, from Utah's Great Salt Lake to Nevada's Pyramid Lake. In each place, the voices of the lost call out, warning or condemning those who hear them. Perhaps these are not separate legends at all, but a single story carried wherever grief and water meet. The Snake River runs on, silent by day, restless by night, and if the water babies are truly there, they are a reminder of choices made in desperation, choices that echo long after the voices that made them are gone. On the outskirts of Chicago, along Archer Avenue, there is a ghost story that has haunted the city for nearly a century. She is called Resurrection Mary, and she is one of the most famous hitchhiking phantoms in America. The story begins in the 1930s. A young woman, dressed in a pale gown, was dancing at a ballroom one evening. Some say she quarreled with her date, others that she left in anger. She set off walking alone along Archer Avenue, heading home. But she never made it. The night was cold, and sometime before morning she was struck and killed by a passing car. Soon after, the sightings began. Drivers traveling the road late at night reported picking up a young woman dressed in white. She was quiet, polite, and often asked to be taken to the cemetery gates. But just as the car neared Resurrection Cemetery, she would vanish. No door opening, no sound. Simply gone, leaving only the driver's pounding heart and a story they would never forget. Others claimed to see her walking along the roadside, her pale figure illuminated by headlights before disappearing into the darkness. One of the most famous accounts comes from the 1970s, when a driver reported giving her a ride, only for her to vanish from the back seat as he passed the cemetery. His story was so detailed, so shaken, that it fueled a new wave of fascination with Mary. Even stranger are the marks left behind. In the 1970s, the cemetery gates themselves appeared scorched and twisted, as though someone's hands had gripped the iron with impossible force. Some said it was Mary, trying to pull her way free of the grave. The caretakers replaced the bars, but the legend only grew stronger. Resurrection Mary has become more than just a Chicago story. She is part of a global pattern, the vanishing hitchhiker. Tales of ghostly passengers appear across the world. A woman in white who needs a ride, who disappears before reaching her destination. In Hawaii, in South Africa, in England. The details change, but the spirit remains the same. And yet in Chicago, Mary feels different. Perhaps because her story is tied to a real place, a real road, a real cemetery where countless people have seen her. She is no longer just folklore. She is local history, repeated again and again until the boundary between truth and myth is worn away. Whether she is the restless soul of a young woman or a universal story wearing a local face, Resurrection Mary remains Chicago's most enduring ghost. And every driver who passes Resurrection Cemetery at night glances just a little longer into the shadows, wondering if she's still waiting for a ride. In the small town of Brazil, Indiana, tucked deep into the countryside, lies a graveyard with a peculiar reputation. It's not the headstones that draw people here, or the stories of restless spirits. It's the steps, 100 of them, climbing the hill of what is now known as the 100 Steps Cemetery. The legend is simple and terrifying. At midnight, if you climb the steps alone, you must count each one carefully. Exactly 100. When you reach the top, you are said to be met by the Undertaker himself, a shadowy figure who shows you a vision of your own death. Not a dream, not a suggestion, a prophecy. Once you've seen it, there's only one way to break free. You must descend those same steps, counting once more. If you count a number other than 100, the legend warns that your death will come far sooner than the vision foretold. And some say, you may not leave at all. Visitors tell strange stories. People swear they felt hands shoving them, unseen voices whispering in their ears, and sudden bursts of icy wind as they climb. Others claim to have blacked out halfway, waking at the bottom of the hill with no memory of how they got there. And then there are those who laugh it off, scoffing at the idea of cursed steps, only to leave shaken, convinced they heard something following them in the dark. The most unsettling part of the tale is this. Over the years, the steps have worn down. Some even vanished into the earth. Yet those who climb at midnight still count 100. No more, no less. Skeptics call it superstition, a rural ghost story meant to frighten teenagers away from loitering in the graveyard. They blame uneven ground, the power of suggestion, or the tricks of an anxious mind. But ask anyone who has walked those steps in silence, with only the moon as witness, and they'll tell you the same thing. It feels different. The air is heavier, the world quieter, and the steps seem to stretch on far longer than they should. Of course, Indiana is not alone in its rituals of death. Across the world, cemeteries carry their own rules. Touch the wrong grave, step over the wrong stone, speak the wrong name, and something is said to follow you home. The 100 steps are simply Indiana's reminder that the boundary between life and death is never walked lightly. Whether the steps lead to prophecy or only into fear, no one can say for certain. But one thing is true. Every person who climbs them at midnight leaves the same way, looking over their shoulder. On a quiet street in the small town of Villisca, Iowa, stands a white, two-story house. Its design is ordinary, its appearance unremarkable, but its history is anything but. Locals call it the Villisca Axe Murder House, and for more than a century, it has carried the weight of one of America's darkest unsolved crimes. On the night of June 9, 1912, the Moore family, Josiah and Sarah, along with their 4 children, returned home from church. They were joined by 2 young girls who had come for a sleepover. The house was full of laughter, prayers, and the comfort of a small-town summer night. But by dawn, everyone inside was dead. Someone had entered the house while the family slept, carrying an axe. One by one, he made his way through the rooms, striking each victim with brutal force. 8 lives ended before sunrise. And when the neighbors came to check on the family the next morning, they found a scene so gruesome it still defies description. The investigation that followed shook the town. Suspects ranged from a traveling preacher to a local senator's son, to drifters who passed through by rail. But the case was never solved. No one was convicted. The killer was never caught. The crime became a wound that never healed, staining the town's history forever. And in the years that followed, the house itself became something else. Visitors began to report strange experiences, footsteps in empty hallways, children's laughter echoing from the upstairs bedrooms, doors opening and closing on their own. Some said they felt a pressure in the air, heavy, suffocating, as if unseen eyes were always watching. Paranormal investigators have flocked to Villisca, recording unexplained voices, sudden cold spots, and objects moving without cause. More than one skeptic has left shaken, unwilling to spend another night inside. And every so often, someone claims to feel something darker, a malevolent presence that isn't the family at all, but perhaps the killer himself, lingering in the place where his violence forever changed the town. The story of the Villisca Axe murder house is not just a ghost story. It is a reminder of how the ordinary can be shattered in a single night. A reminder that some crimes never find their justice, and that sometimes the dead do not rest quietly. Today, the house still stands. You can visit it. You can even stay the night, if you're brave enough. But those who have tried say the house doesn't welcome visitors. It endures them. In the tiny town of Stull, Kansas, population barely scratching the hundreds, there is a cemetery that looms far larger than the town itself. It is a small graveyard, ordinary in appearance, quiet like any other. But for decades it has carried a reputation unlike any other. They say Stull Cemetery is one of the 7 gateways to hell. The stories stretch back generations. According to legend, strange rituals were once held among the graves. Witches, cultists, and devil worshippers claimed the land as their own. Some whispered that an old tree once served as the gallows for witches, their spirits still hanging in the air long after the branches fell. Others said the devil himself visited the cemetery twice a year, once on the spring equinox and once on Halloween, rising from a hidden stairway that led straight to hell. The stairway is one of the most enduring tales. Supposedly it lies somewhere among the graves, invisible to ordinary eyes. But if you find it, and dare to descend, the steps stretch downward endlessly, carrying you into darkness with no return. No one has ever proven it exists, but no one can prove it doesn't either. Through the years, strange occurrences have kept the legend alive. Visitors speak of overwhelming dread as soon as they enter. Objects vanish. Shadows move against the moonlight. Some have claimed to see fires burning in the cemetery at night, though no source could be found. And in the 1970s, the stories became so persistent that they drew national attention, turning Stull into one of the most notorious haunted places in America. Of course, skeptics dismiss it all. They say it's folklore, fueled by overactive imaginations and the thrill of trespassing teenagers. The locals of Stull themselves often roll their eyes, insisting it's nothing more than an old cemetery where people are laid to rest in peace. And yet, the town has also gone to great lengths to keep people away. The church that once stood on the grounds, crumbling and abandoned, was torn down without warning. The graveyard is heavily patrolled, and trespassers are arrested on sight. Which raises the question, if there's nothing there, why protect it so fiercely? Stull Cemetery's legend mirrors other gateways to hell across the world, in Greece, in Turkey, in Italy. Places where myth and geography blur into the supernatural. But in Kansas, it has taken firm root, becoming a story far bigger than the small town itself. Whether or not the devil has ever set foot in Stull, the fear is real, and so is the power of the tale. Some places earn their infamy through spectacle. Others earn it through silence. Stull does it through both. On the outskirts of Louisville, Kentucky, there is a towering railroad trestle that stretches across the woods and fields. By day, it looks like nothing more than an old bridge of steel and timber, carrying trains across the valley below. But by night, it becomes the stage for one of the most unsettling legends in America. They call it the Pope Lick Monster. The creature is described as half man, half goat. Some say it has the body of a man with the twisted horns and legs of a beast. Others claim its face is deformed, somewhere between human and animal, with eyes that glow in the dark. And the stories of what it does are even more disturbing. According to legend, the Pope Lick Monster has the power to hypnotize those who cross the trestle. It calls to them with a voice inside their heads, luring them onto the narrow bridge where escape is impossible. When the train comes, there is nowhere to run. Some say the creature laughs as its victims fall to their deaths or are struck down on the tracks. Other tales paint the monster as more violent, attacking trespassers outright, tearing them apart beneath the trestle. And in some versions, it carries an axe, a grotesque parody of the urban boogeyman, waiting for the next curious soul foolish enough to test the legend. Where did it come from? No one knows for certain. Some say it was the result of a twisted experiment, a man fused with a goat in some hidden laboratory. Others say it is the cursed child of Satan himself, born of blasphemy and left to roam the earth. There are even whispers that it is older than all of these stories, a spirit of the land, a dark guardian of the bridge who takes the lives of those who cross it without respect. What makes the Pope Lick Monster more chilling than most legends is the reality tied to it. Over the decades, people have died on that trestle, not from the creature itself, but from the trains that still thunder across it. Drawn by the legend, thrill seekers and curiosity seekers have walked the tracks, only to be caught when the whistle blew. The line between myth and tragedy is razor thin. Kentucky is no stranger to ghosts. The haunted halls of Waverly Hills Sanatorium, the lingering spirits of Civil War battlefields. But the Pope Lick Monster stands apart. It is not just a story whispered in the dark. It is a story that has left bodies on the ground. Whether it is real or not almost doesn't matter. The bridge remains, the legend endures, and the danger is very real. And perhaps that is the truest form of a monster, one that doesn't just haunt your imagination, but changes how you act in the world. Deep in the swamps and bayous of southern Louisiana, where the cypress trees rise from black water and the mist clings to the marshes, there is a creature that has haunted Cajun folklore for centuries. They call it the Rougarou. The Rougarou is said to be a shapeshifter, most often taking the form of a wolf-like beast, walking upright like a man, with glowing red eyes and a hunger for flesh. Some describe it as Louisiana's werewolf. Others say it is something older, darker, and bound to the land itself. The origins of the Rougarou are tangled in legend. In some stories, it is a curse placed upon those who break the rules of the Catholic faith, those who ignore Lent, or stray too far from God's teachings. For 40 days and nights they become the beast, stalking the swamps, feeding on blood. In other versions, the curse is passed like a disease. If the Rougarou draws your blood, you too become one of its kind. Parents in Cajun country used the Rougarou as a warning. Misbehave, and the beast will come for you. Stay out too late, and it will drag you into the swamp. Yet the legend was more than just a scare tactic. For many, it was real. Fishermen claimed to see glowing eyes on the banks at night. Hunters spoke of massive tracks in the mud, larger than any wolf. And farmers told of livestock slaughtered in ways no natural predator could explain. The Rougarou is not unique to Louisiana. Its roots stretch back to France, where the Lougarou, the wolfman, was feared for centuries. French settlers brought the tale with them to the New World, and in the swamps of Louisiana, the creature took on a life of its own, blending Old World myth with the mysteries of the bayou. Even today, the Rougarou endures. Festivals are held in its name, costumes crafted to honor it, and hunters still whisper about strange things seen in the fog. Skeptics dismiss it as folklore, a Cajun boogeyman woven from religion and imagination. But those who grew up in the bayou know better. Even today, the Rougarou endures. Festivals are held in its name, costumes crafted to honor it, and hunters still whisper about strange things seen in the fog. Skeptics dismiss it as folklore, a Cajun boogeyman woven from religion and imagination. But those who grew up in the bayou know better. The Rougarou is not just a story. It is a presence, a warning, a reminder that some places are not meant to be walked alone after dark. And perhaps that is why the legend has lasted so long. In the bayou, shadows move differently. The water hides secrets. And when you hear something breathing just beyond the reeds, you'll wonder if it's the Rougarou watching you, or something worse. Off the rocky coast of Maine, battered by waves and fog, lies Seguin Island. Atop its cliffs stands a lighthouse, tall, weathered, and solitary. For sailors, it is a beacon of safety. For those who know its story, it is something else entirely. They say the Seguin Island lighthouse is haunted, not by shipwrecks, but by madness. The tale begins in the 1800s, when a keeper lived there with his young wife. The island was isolated, cut off from the mainland for weeks at a time. Supplies were scarce, and company even scarcer. To ease his wife's loneliness, the keeper ordered a piano to be brought to the island, hauled up the steep cliffs, set in their quarters, and tuned for her to play. It was a kind gesture, but there was a problem. She knew only one song, and day after day, week after week, the same melody drifted through the lighthouse, over and over, with no end in sight. The repetition gnawed at the keeper's mind. The isolation, the monotony, and that single tune playing without mercy. Finally, something inside him broke. In a fit of rage, he took an axe to the piano, and then to his wife. When the deed was done, he turned the blade on himself. Ever since, visitors claim the music never truly stopped. On quiet nights, when the wind dies and the fog hangs heavy over the island, a faint piano melody drifts through the air. Sailors hear it carried over the waves. Keepers who came after reported it echoing through the halls, though no piano has ever been seen there again. Some even claim to glimpse the figure of a woman, her hands hovering over invisible keys, forever repeating the song that drove her husband to madness. Skeptics dismiss it as legend, a cautionary tale about isolation and the dangers of solitude. But those who have lived on Seguin Island know its weight. The silence there is thick, the loneliness palpable, and when the fog presses against the windows, the line between memory and haunting feels very thin indeed. Maine is filled with tales of haunted lighthouses, guardians of the sea who refuse to leave their posts even after death. But Seguin Island is different. It is not a ghost of duty or disaster. It is a ghost born of obsession, repetition, and madness. And perhaps that is why the story endures. Because sometimes the things that destroy us are not storms or wars or shipwrecks, but the quiet, endless sound of a single note, played too many times. In the suburbs of Prince George's County, Maryland, there are wooded back roads where the streetlights fade and the trees close in. For decades, locals have whispered of something that stalks those woods. A creature, neither man nor beast. They call it the Goat Man. The Goat Man is described as a towering figure, half human, half goat, with matted fur, cloven hooves, and horns curling from its skull. Some stories give it glowing eyes. Others describe it carrying an axe, dragging the blade along the pavement as it prowls the night. The origins of the Goat Man vary. One tale says it was once a scientist working at the nearby Beltsville Agricultural Research Center, transformed into a monster after an experiment went wrong. Another claims it is an ancient spirit of the land, awoken by the encroachment of towns and highways. And then there is the simplest explanation of all, that the Goat Man is nothing more than a demon, born to sow fear where shadows linger. Encounters stretch back to the 1950s and 60s. Lovers parked along secluded roads reported a beast attacking their cars, battering doors, denting hoods, and shrieking into the night. Farmers blamed it for the slaughter of pets and livestock, left torn apart in the fields. Even police were called to investigate strange sightings, though they found no creature to blame. The legend grew so strong that it seeped into pop culture. Articles, books, and television shows all carried the story of Maryland's Goat Man, making it one of America's most recognizable cryptids. And yet, despite the publicity, sightings never fully stopped. Even today, locals speak of strange figures at the edge of their headlights, or heavy footsteps echoing through the woods when no one is there. What makes the Goat Man unnerving is not just what it looks like, but what it represents. The idea that something could stand between man and animal, intelligence and instinct, civilization and chaos. A reminder that just outside our neighborhoods and backyards, the wilderness still keeps its secrets. Skeptics dismiss it as misidentifications, a bear, a large dog, or even pranksters in costume. But believers argue the consistency of the stories cannot be ignored. And in Maryland, the Goat Man has become more than a myth. He is part of the identity of the place, a shadow burned into its folklore. Some legends inspire awe, others command respect. The Goat Man demands only fear. In April of 1977, the small town of Dover, Massachusetts became the center of one of the strangest creature sightings in American history. For 2 nights, over the span of 25 hours, 4 teenagers encountered something that has since been known as the Dover Demon. The descriptions are unnerving. A creature no more than 3 to 4 feet tall, with an oversized head shaped like a melon, glowing orange eyes, long spindly fingers, and pale hairless skin stretched tight across its bones. It crawled on all fours, moving like no animal anyone had seen before. The first sighting came from a young man driving late at night. His headlights caught the figure crawling along a stone wall. At first he thought it was a dog, but as the car drew closer, the thing turned, its enormous head and glowing eyes fixed on him, its body clinging to the rocks like a grotesque insect. In terror, he sped away. The next night, other teens reported similar encounters. One saw the creature crouched near a tree, its long fingers wrapped around the bark. Another described it sitting upright, staring at them silently before slipping into the woods. None of the witnesses knew each other, yet their accounts matched with eerie precision. Police investigated but found no evidence. No tracks, no fur, no sign of anything unusual. The sightings were brief, fleeting, and then they stopped. The Dover demon was never seen again. Some say it was a misidentified animal, a foal, a raccoon, perhaps a sick dog. Others believe it was an alien, stranded on Earth for a moment before vanishing back into the stars. A few even tie it to Native American legends of trickster spirits, slipping between worlds to confuse and frighten the living. What makes the Dover demon remarkable is its brevity. Unlike Bigfoot, the Mothman, or the Jersey Devil, it appeared only once in history, then disappeared forever. Yet in that short time, it left a mark so deep that its legend persists nearly 50 years later. Maybe that is the true power of a legend, not how often it appears, but how unforgettable it becomes. The Dover demon came and went in a single night, but in Massachusetts, its shadow still lingers. In the dense forests of Michigan, hunters whisper of a creature that is neither man nor wolf, but something caught in between. It walks upright on two legs, its body muscled and covered in dark fur, its head the snarling shape of a dog. Its eyes glow like embers in the dark. They call it the Dog Man. Stories of the Dog Man go back further than you might expect. Native American legends speak of a half-man, half-canine guardian of the woods, sometimes protector, sometimes predator. Early settlers brought their own accounts, strange tracks in the snow, howls that were too deep, too resonant to be any ordinary wolf. But the legend truly took hold in 1887 in Wexford County. Two lumberjacks reported seeing a creature with a man's body and a dog's head staring at them from the edge of the forest. The sighting was so vivid, so bizarre, that it spread through camp after camp. Soon others began to tell of similar encounters. A figure that ran like a wolf but stood like a man. For decades, the Dog Man was a local legend, half joke, half warning. That is, until 1987, when a radio DJ in Traverse City wrote a novelty song about the creature for April Fool's Day. He never expected anyone to take it seriously. But then the calls began. Listeners phoned in with their own stories. Real encounters, stretching back years. Farmers, hunters, even police officers claimed to have seen the Dog Man. The joke had pulled back the curtain on something far older, far stranger. Sightings continue to this day. Drivers on back roads claim a tall, canine figure darted across their headlights. Hikers speak of growls following them through the woods, always too close, though nothing can be seen. Some describe the feeling of being watched, the hairs on their arms rising, before the sound of padded footsteps vanishes into the trees. Skeptics dismiss it as misidentifications, a bear, a wolf, or the tricks of imagination under stress. But the Dogman has become more than a shadow in the woods. It has become part of Michigan's identity. A cryptid is feared as it is beloved. What sets the Dogman apart from other legends is its persistence. It isn't tied to one town, one decade, or one story. It appears again and again, across generations, as though it belongs to the land itself. Perhaps the Dogman is nothing more than myth. Or perhaps it is what every hunter fears most. The idea that in the forest, something stronger, faster, and smarter is watching. In the frozen forests of Minnesota, where winters are long and survival is never guaranteed, there is a legend whispered with fear. It is the story of a creature born not from the wilderness itself, but from hunger, desperation, and greed. They call it the Wendigo. The Wendigo comes from Algonquian tradition, its legend told for centuries among the native peoples of the northern woodlands. It is described as a towering figure, gaunt and skeletal, its skin stretched tight over bones, its eyes burning with insatiable hunger. Some say it has antlers, or the skull of a deer. Others say it looks like a man who has been consumed by something far older, far darker. The Wendigo is more than just a monster. It is a warning. It is said to be born when a person resorts to cannibalism in the dead of winter, when starvation drives them to eat human flesh. In that moment, the soul twists, the body transforms, and a Wendigo is created. Cursed to roam the forests forever, always starving, never satisfied. Hunters in the 1800s told of voices in the wind, calling their names through the trees. Camps were found abandoned, supplies left behind. No tracks in the snow except those leading deeper into the woods. Some claim to see a figure lurking at the edge of the firelight, taller than any man, watching, waiting. The legend grew so powerful that even in the 20th century, cases of Wendigo psychosis were recorded. Individuals convinced they were becoming Wendigos, or that their neighbors were, driven to madness by fear of hunger and isolation. Whether supernatural or psychological, the Wendigo has always thrived in the emptiness of the wilderness. Minnesota is not alone in this story. Across Canada, Wisconsin, and the Great Lakes, the Wendigo appears again and again, a spirit of famine and winter. But in Minnesota, where the forests stretch for miles and the winters can kill even the strongest, the Wendigo feels at home. Skeptics say it is nothing more than folklore, a way to explain the unthinkable in times of scarcity. But those who have seen its shadow moving across the snow tell a different story. They say the Wendigo is not just legend. It is hunger given form. In the heart of Mississippi, in the town of Yazoo City, there is a grave surrounded by iron chains. Locals know it well, because of the story tied to it. The story of the Witch of Yazoo City. The legend begins in the late 1800s. They say there was a woman who lived deep in the swamps outside town, feared and avoided by all who knew her. Some called her a witch, others a recluse, but all agreed there was something dangerous about her. One day, local authorities accused her of luring fishermen into the swamp and killing them. When they came to arrest her, she fled into the wilderness. The posse chased her through the trees until, desperate, she became trapped in quicksand. As she sank, she screamed out a curse upon the town. "In 20 years I will return, and I will burn this town to the ground." The townspeople buried her body in Glenwood Cemetery, but they did not take chances. They surrounded her grave with heavy chains, binding the earth itself, in hopes of keeping her spirit from rising. For a time, nothing happened. But exactly 20 years later, in 1904, Yazoo City was struck by a devastating fire. The flames swept through the town, destroying over 200 buildings. People remembered the witch's curse, and many believed it had come true. Since then, the grave has become one of the most famous in Mississippi. The chains remain around it to this day, though more than once they've been found broken, not by vandals, but by some unseen force. Each time the town replaces them, fearful of what might happen if the bindings are left undone. Skeptics argue the fire was coincidence, a tragic accident, nothing more. But legends rarely die when coincidence is enough. And in Yazoo City, the story has been passed down for generations. The witch's curse woven into the identity of the town itself. The witch of Yazoo City may be gone, her body long since turned to dust. But the chains remain, rattling softly in the Mississippi wind. A reminder that some promises are kept, even after death. In the summer of 1972, the quiet town of Louisiana, Missouri, found itself in the grip of fear. Residents reported sightings of a creature so strange, so terrifying, that newspapers across the country carried the story. They called it Momo, short for the Missouri Monster. Witnesses described Momo as a massive, hairy beast, standing more than 7 feet tall, its body covered in shaggy black fur. Unlike other cryptid tales, there was one detail that made Momo unforgettable: the smell. People said it reeked of rot, a stench so powerful it made the air unbreathable. Its eyes glowed like orange embers, and it carried the carcass of a dog beneath its arm when first spotted. The first reports came from children playing near the woods. They ran home screaming, claiming a monster was watching them from the tree line. Soon after, adults began to see it too, lumbering through the forest, leaving behind enormous 3-toed footprints. Panic spread quickly. Armed search parties scoured the woods around Marzolf Hill, determined to drive the beast out. Though Momo was never captured, the stories multiplied. Families said it rattled their homes at night. Farmers blamed it for livestock vanishing. Some even claimed it stalked them silently on country roads, its glowing eyes hovering just beyond the headlights. The legend faded after a few years, but not completely. To this day, locals still tell the story of Momo, and cryptid hunters occasionally visit the region, hoping to find proof of the beast that terrified Missouri nearly 50 years ago. What makes Momo unique is not just the fear it inspired, but how quickly it spread. Within weeks, a local story had become a national phenomenon. And unlike older legends, tied to centuries of folklore, Momo was born in modern times, under the eye of television, radio, and newspapers. It shows that even in an age of cameras and headlines, monsters still find their way into our lives. Skeptics argue it was nothing more than a bear, misidentified in the heat of the moment. Others think it was a hoax, exaggerated by frightened children and fueled by eager reporters. But for those who lived in Louisiana, Missouri, in 1972, the fear was real. And perhaps that's what matters most. Because legends don't need proof to survive. They only need memory, and the shadow of something strange in the trees. In the wide plains and rugged mountains of Montana, where the land stretches into silence, hunters speak of a creature that does not belong to the natural order. It is called the Warak'in, a beast of shadow and hunger. The name comes from the Iowa and other native tribes of the region. Roughly translated, it means carries off dogs, a reference to the creature's reputation for preying on animals kept close to camp. Descriptions vary, but they all share a certain dread. The Warak'in is said to be wolf-like, but longer, leaner, with a sloping back and a face not quite canine. Closer, some say, to a hyena. Its fur is dark, its cry chilling, and its appetite insatiable. The earliest settler accounts describe it attacking livestock, moving like a shadow across the prairie, faster and stronger than any wolf. Families spoke of waking in the night to the sound of their dogs howling, and then silence. By morning the dogs were gone, and strange tracks pressed into the dirt led back into the wilderness. One of the most infamous accounts comes from the 1880s, when a rancher claimed to have shot and killed a strange beast matching the descriptions. The carcass was mounted and displayed in a small museum for decades, nicknamed Ringdokus. Though it was eventually lost, some researchers believe it may have been a surviving relative of an extinct animal, perhaps even a prehistoric hyena-like predator, thought to be gone for thousands of years. Modern sightings continue, though rare. Hunters in Montana and neighboring states occasionally report seeing a dark, wolfish animal that does not fit the profile of coyotes, wolves, or mountain lions. Its presence is fleeting, its impact undeniable. Livestock torn apart, the eerie feeling of being watched from the tree line, the echo of a cry that sounds not quite wolf, not quite anything else. Skeptics argue it is nothing more than misidentification. A large wolf, a feral dog, or an animal with deformities. But the legend persists, passed from native tradition to frontier folklore to modern cryptozoology. And in Montana, where wilderness still swallows whole counties, there is room enough for monsters to remain unseen. The Warak'in endures because it taps into something older than any one place. The fear of predators we cannot name, shadows with teeth just beyond the firelight. South of Nebraska City, there is a lonely country road that winds through farmland and quiet woods. By day it looks like any other back road, but at night, locals say it carries the weight of a terrible history. They call it Seven Sisters Road. The legend tells of a father and his 7 daughters who lived nearby more than a century ago. For reasons lost to time, the man snapped. Some say it was madness. Others say it was anger, or jealousy, or something darker still. Whatever the cause, He led his daughters, one by one, to the trees along the roadside, and there he hanged them. 7 sisters, silenced in a single night. Since then, the road has been haunted. Drivers report headlights dimming for no reason, radios cutting out, and engines stalling as they approach the old trees. Others hear the sound of women screaming, or bells tolling in the distance, though no church stands nearby. And some claim to see shadows in the woods, 7 figures swaying in the branches, watching as cars pass beneath. For generations, teenagers have tested the road, daring each other to drive it after midnight. Many swear they have seen strange lights in the trees, or felt icy hands brush against them inside their cars. Even skeptics admit the road feels different at night, heavy, unsettling, as though the air itself remembers what happened there. The truth behind the story has never been proven. Historians argue there are no records of 7 sisters killed in that way. Some believe the tale was born as a warning to keep people from wandering lonely roads at night. But legends don't need written proof to survive. They live in memory, in whispers, and in the fear that makes you lock your doors when you drive too far into the dark. What makes 7 Sisters Road endure is the simplicity of it. A road, a tree, a tragedy, and the idea that grief and violence can stain a place forever. Nebraska has no shortage of ghost stories, but this one remains the most enduring. A reminder that the quietest places can hold the loudest echoes. Beneath the deserts and mountains of Nevada lies a labyrinth of tunnels. Old silver mines, gold mines, and shafts that stretch for miles into the dark. Many are abandoned, their entrances sealed, their secrets buried. But according to legend, not everything in those mines was left behind. Miners spoke of strange spirits in the rock. They called them Tommyknockers. The Tommyknockers were described as small, gnome-like figures, no taller than a child, with wrinkled faces and eyes that gleamed in the dark. Some said they wore miners' clothes, tiny boots, and carried picks and lanterns of their own. Others never saw them at all, only heard the sound, knocking, sharp raps echoing through the tunnels. The knocks could mean salvation or doom. To some miners, the Tommyknockers were protectors, warning of cave-ins by tapping on the walls before disaster struck. To others, they were tricksters, luring men deeper into the shafts until they were lost forever. Stories told of voices whispering from the dark, laughter echoing where no one should be, and shadows darting just beyond the lamplight. The belief ran so deep that many miners left offerings, bread, bits of food, or shiny trinkets, to appease the Tommyknockers and keep them friendly. And when accidents did happen, the survivors often swore they had been warned, too late, by the faint knocking that no one could explain. The legend wasn't unique to Nevada. It came with the Cornish miners who traveled to America in the 1800s, bringing their traditions with them. In Cornwall, the knockers were well-known spirits of the mines, respected and feared in equal measure. When the miners came west, the stories found a new home in the mountains and deserts of Nevada, where men staked their lives on the promise of gold and silver. Even today, the legend endures. In Nevada's ghost towns, explorers claim to hear tapping in the sealed shafts, as though the spirits of long-dead miners are still working below. Paranormal investigators speak of whispers caught on tape, of rocks thrown in empty tunnels, of lanterns that flicker when no wind stirs. Skeptics say it is all superstition, the natural groaning of old wood beams, the settling of rock, the tricks of an echoing cave. But for the miners who lived and died underground, the Tommyknockers were no trick. They were part of life and death. Some spirits haunt houses, some haunt roads. In Nevada, they haunt the very bones of the earth. In the shadow of New Hampshire's White Mountains, where forests stretch for miles and silence settles thick between the trees, there are stories of something that watches from the timberline. Not a bear, not a moose, not anything that belongs to the natural order. They call them the wood devils. The wood devils are described as tall, thin creatures, sometimes over 7 feet high, their bodies covered in gray or ash-colored fur that blends perfectly with the birch trees. They move quickly, slipping behind trunks and vanishing into the woods with uncanny speed. Hunters say they are masters of camouflage. You never see them until they want you to. And when you do, it's usually only for a heartbeat, before they disappear again. Reports stretch back more than a century. Lumberjacks told of figures darting between trees, too slender to be bears, too tall to be men. Hikers claimed to hear footsteps pacing them through the forest, always just out of sight. Some said they felt eyes watching from the ridgelines, long before they spotted a flicker of gray fur against the bark. Unlike other creatures of legend, the wood devils rarely show aggression. They don't attack camps, they don't kill livestock. Instead, they watch, always watching. That perhaps is what makes them so unsettling. A predator announces itself. A shadow that studies you in silence carries a different kind of fear. Skeptics argue the wood devils are nothing more than misidentified wildlife. Bears standing upright, moose seen from a distance. The tricks of light and shadow in a forest where your eyes are never truly at rest. But believers point out the consistency of the stories. Always tall, always thin, always gray. Too many accounts across too many decades to dismiss so easily. And then there's the larger connection. Stories of tall, hairy beings echo across the world. Sasquatch in the Pacific Northwest, the Yeti of the Himalayas, creatures of the Australian bush. Perhaps the wood devils are New Hampshire's version of this worldwide mystery. Or perhaps they are something else entirely. Something that belongs only to the deep forests of New England. Even now, hikers in the White Mountains say they sometimes feel it, the sense of being tracked, followed, measured by something just beyond the tree line. And if the stories are true, the wood devils are still there, tall, thin, and patient, waiting for the moment you let your guard down. In the heart of New Jersey lies the Pine Barrens, a stretch of forest so vast and desolate that it feels like another world. For centuries, people have feared what might lurk beneath its twisted pines and endless swamps. And at the center of those fears is a creature known as the Jersey Devil. The legend begins in the 1700s with a woman called Mother Leeds. According to the story, she was pregnant with her 13th child. Exhausted, angry, and cursed by poverty, she cried out that this one would be born of the devil himself. On the night of the birth, her prophecy came true. The baby arrived normal, but within minutes it began to change. Its body stretched, its legs twisted into hooves, Wings sprouted from its back, and a forked tail lashed behind it. With a scream, the creature killed the midwife, tore through the house, and flew into the night sky. The Jersey Devil was born. For more than 250 years, sightings have continued. Descriptions vary, but all speak of a creature with leathery wings, the head of a goat or horse, and a high-pitched scream that chills the blood. It has been seen gliding between the trees, perching on rooftops, even terrorizing towns. In the early 1900s, the legend reached its peak. For a single week in 1909, newspapers across the state were filled with reports of a winged beast. Police officers claimed to have shot at it. Schools closed in fear. Entire towns locked their doors at night. And though no proof was ever found, the panic was real. Over the years, explanations have been offered. Some say it was a misidentified sandhill crane. Others a hoax spread by rival newspapers. Still others believe the Leeds family, real people who lived in the Pine Barrens, were unfairly tied to the story as outcasts. But none of these explanations have silenced the legend. The Jersey Devil has become more than a monster. It is a symbol of New Jersey itself, a blend of history, folklore, and fear that refuses to die. It appears in sports teams, festivals, even pop culture. And yet, deep in the Pine Barrens, the stories continue. People still hear the screams at night. They still see shadows moving in the trees where no man or beast should be. What makes the Jersey Devil endure is not just its monstrous form, but the reminder it carries. That in the most ordinary places, a forest, a farm, a back road, there may still be things older, darker, and hungrier than we care to believe. Along the rivers of New Mexico, where the Rio Grande winds through deserts and valleys, there is a legend older than the state itself. It is the story of a woman whose grief turned to rage, whose voice still echoes through the night. They call her La Llorona, the Weeping Woman. The story begins with Maria, a beautiful woman who married a wealthy man. For a time, their life was filled with joy, and together they had 2 children. But as the years passed, her husband grew distant. He left her for another woman, abandoning Maria and their family. In her sorrow and fury, Maria turned on the only things she had left, her children. In a fit of madness, she dragged them to the river and held them beneath the water until they were gone. And when she realized what she had done, she collapsed on the riverbank, wailing until her voice was gone. Soon after, she died. Some say she drowned herself in the same river. Others say she wasted away, her cries never ceasing. But death did not silence her. For centuries, people have claimed to hear her voice, a woman's sobbing carried on the wind. They say she wanders the banks of rivers and streams, her white dress torn and soaked, her eyes hollow, her face hidden by a veil. She searches endlessly for her children, and when she finds others, the living, she mistakes them for her own. Parents in New Mexico use the story as a warning. Misbehave, and La Llorona will take you. Stay out too late, and she will drag you to the river. But the warnings became more than just stories. Travelers swear they have seen her figure in the moonlight. Drivers crossing bridges at night say they've heard the cries, chilling and unearthly, rising from the water below. The legend of La Llorona has spread far beyond New Mexico. Versions exist across Mexico, Central America, and throughout the American Southwest. She is a ghost, a banshee, a cursed soul whose grief has no end. And though the details change, her name, her appearance, the river she haunts, the sound remains the same, a mother's endless cry. Some argue it is nothing more than folklore, a story born of tragedy and superstition. But believers know better, because grief is stronger than death, and sorrow this deep does not fade with time. La Llorona weeps still, her voice rising with the rivers of New Mexico, a reminder that the past is never truly gone. On a quiet street in Amityville, New York, there stands a house that looks like any other suburban home. White siding, dark shutters, a lawn that once held children at play. But behind its walls lies one of the most notorious legends in American history, the story of the Amityville Horror. It began in 1974, with tragedy. Inside that house, Ronald DeFeo Jr. took a rifle and murdered his parents and 4 siblings as they slept. The crime shocked the town. DeFeo was convicted, and the house was left in silence. But silence rarely lasts long in places marked by blood. A year later, the Lutz family moved in. George and Kathy Lutz, along with their 3 children, bought the home at a bargain price. They knew what had happened there, but believed they could make it their own. Within days, they realized they were wrong. According to their account, the house came alive with terror. Cold spots formed in rooms with no draft. Green slime oozed from the walls. Doors were ripped from their hinges. At night, they claimed to hear footsteps pacing the halls, and disembodied voices whispering their names. George Lutz said he woke at 3:15 every morning, the exact time of the DeFeo murders. Kathy had nightmares of the killings themselves. The children began to speak of strange friends no one else could see. The family lasted only 28 days before fleeing the house, leaving behind their possessions and their hope for a new life. Their story became the Amityville Horror, a book and later a film that burned the legend into pop culture forever. Skeptics argue it was all a hoax, a fabricated tale designed for fame and fortune. Investigators found no physical evidence of slime, no proof of supernatural activity. Lawsuits and accusations swirled around the Lutzes for years. And yet, others who visited the house reported unease, strange feelings, even unexplained phenomena. Enough to keep the story alive, long after the family was gone. The Amityville house still stands today, remodeled and resold, its infamous windows staring out like watchful eyes. New owners rarely speak of it, eager to leave the legend in the past. But the story endures because it sits at the crossroads of 2 things that never let go: real violence and imagined horror. Whether the haunting was fact or fiction, the murders were real. 6 lives ended in that house, and no one who looks upon it can forget. In the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, there is a place where the night sky holds a secret. For centuries, people have reported strange glowing orbs drifting over the ridges and valleys. They rise, they flicker, they vanish. They are known as the Brown Mountain Lights. The earliest stories come from the Cherokee, who told of spirits of warriors lost in battle, their souls appearing as lights to guide the living. Later, settlers carried their own explanations: lanterns of murdered travelers, campfires of ghostly hunters, or the restless dead searching for peace. But whatever the tale, the phenomenon itself is real. Countless witnesses, hunters, hikers, locals, even government surveyors, have seen the lights. They appear as glowing spheres, sometimes white, sometimes orange or red, hovering just above the treetops. They drift, they split, they fade, and then they return again on another night. During the early 1900s, so many people reported the lights that the U.S. Geological Survey investigated. Their conclusion: reflections of headlights and trains in the valley below. But this answer satisfied few, because the lights were seen long before cars or trains ever touched the region. Even today, when conditions are just right, the lights appear with no explanation science can fully prove. Legends only add to the mystery. Some say the lights are ghostly lanterns of men searching for lost wives or children. Others believe they are the souls of native women, forever mourning their fallen warriors. Still others claim they are something older, something elemental, a part of the land itself, glowing as the mountains breathe. What makes the brown mountain lights endure is the way they blur the line between myth and reality. They are not just campfire stories, but phenomena witnessed again and again. Skeptics call them tricks of the eye, the play of atmosphere, gases, or reflections. But those who have stood on the ridges at night, who have seen the orbs rise silently into the sky, know the truth feels larger than science. The mountains of North Carolina carry many stories, but the Brown Mountain Lights remain their most enduring mystery. A reminder that even in a world mapped and measured, the night can still surprise us. The Missouri River cuts a long path through North Dakota, wide, cold, and restless. For centuries, the river has been a source of life and of fear. And in its depths, according to legend, lurks a creature that no one dares to face. The Mandan people call it the Mini-Washita, the water monster. Descriptions of the Mini-Washita are as strange as they are terrifying. It is said to be larger than a buffalo, with scales like armor, a single horn jutting from its head, and a body the color of fire, red as blood, burning against the dark waters. Its eyes glow like embers, and its back bristles with jagged spines. The legend warns that to see the Mini-Washita is to invite death. Those unlucky enough to glimpse it are said to go mad with fear, struck blind, or fall ill and waste away within days. The creature does not need to attack. Its presence alone is a curse. Stories tell of canoes overturned without warning, strong swimmers dragged beneath the surface, and men who returned from the river shaking, their eyes wide with terror at what they had seen. None lived long enough to give more than fragments of a description. Some dismiss the Mini-Washita as mythology, a tale to explain accidents on the river. The Missouri is dangerous, with currents strong enough to drown even the best swimmers. But those who know the legend point to one unsettling fact. The stories have remained unchanged for centuries. Always red, always horned, always deadly to behold. And the Mini-Washita is not alone in the world. Nearly every culture has its water monster, from Scotland's Loch Ness to the dragons of Asia. Perhaps it is because rivers and lakes are the perfect hiding places, their depths shielding what the eye was never meant to see. Or perhaps it is because, deep down, people have always known the water has a hunger of its own. The Missouri River flows on, wide and cold, its surface calm beneath the sun. But to the Mandan, and to those who still whisper of the Mini-Washita, the river holds more than fish and silt. It holds a shadow, and that shadow has teeth. Along the banks of the Little Miami River, near Loveland, Ohio, there are stories of a creature unlike anything else in American folklore. It isn't a ghost or a demon or a shadow in the woods. It is, quite literally, a frog, but not the kind you've ever seen. They call it the Loveland Frogman. The legend began in the 1950s, when a man claimed he saw several strange creatures standing upright along the riverbank. They were about 4 feet tall, with leathery skin, wide mouths, and bulging eyes that glowed in the dark. Startled, he watched as they vanished into the water. For years it was nothing more than a strange local story. But in 1972, 2 Loveland police officers reported their own encounters. One claimed he saw a figure crouched on the side of the road, thinking it was a dog. But as his headlights struck it, the creature stood, revealing itself as something frog-like, with webbed hands and a face unlike any man or animal he had ever seen. Another officer told a similar story just weeks later. The report sparked national attention. Articles appeared across the country. Was Ohio home to its own cryptid? A frog that walked like a man? Some dismissed it as escaped exotic pets, perhaps large lizards or monkeys misidentified in the dark. Others suggested it was nothing more than pranksters in costume. But the legend refused to die. Sightings continued into the modern day, with locals claiming to see a strange, frog-like figure lurking near bridges, riverbanks, and quiet roadsides. In one account, a man even claimed the frogman carried a wand that emitted sparks, a detail so strange it only made the story more enduring. What makes the Loveland Frogman stand out is not its menace, but its mystery. Unlike the Wendigo, the Jersey Devil, or the Dogman, the Frogman isn't tied to violence. It doesn't attack. It doesn't kill. It simply appears and disappears again, leaving only questions behind. Ohio has its share of hauntings and horrors, but the Loveland Frogman remains its strangest legend. In Tulsa, Oklahoma, there once stood a house that became the center of one of the strangest and darkest stories in the state's history. Its name carried fear long after the building itself was gone. They called it the Hex House. The story begins in the 1940s, when police investigated a home owned by a woman named Carol Ann Smith. What they found inside shocked the community. Hidden in her basement were 2 young women, living in near total servitude. They were not chained, nor locked away, but they believed they were bound by something far stronger. A hex. Smith convinced the women that she held supernatural power over them. Through threats, manipulation, and superstition, she forced them to hand over their wages, perform endless chores, and live in silence, believing they would be cursed if they disobeyed. For years the women endured this life, prisoners of fear in a house that appeared ordinary from the outside. When the truth came out, Smith was arrested, and the case made headlines across Oklahoma. The newspapers dubbed it the Hex House, and soon the name carried more than scandal. Locals began to whisper that the house itself was cursed. Strange noises were reported inside after it was abandoned. Shadows moved in the windows. Some swore the women's fear had seeped into the walls, leaving the place haunted long after Smith was gone. Eventually, the house was demolished, but the legend remained. The story of the Hex House became a part of Tulsa's lore, a reminder of how belief can become a prison, and how terror doesn't always come from the supernatural. Sometimes, it comes from the power people hold over one another. Today, the Hex House lives on as a haunted attraction during Halloween, built to thrill and frighten. But for those who know the true story, the name carries a darker weight, because behind the legend is a chilling truth. Sometimes, the most frightening curses are not cast by spirits, but by people. Along the misty coastline of Cannon Beach, Oregon, there is a story whispered among locals, one that turns a quiet drive into a nightmare. They call him the Bandage Man. The Bandage Man is said to be the ghost of a man horribly injured. Some say a logger crushed in an accident, others a convict who escaped and met a violent end. However he died, the result is the same. A figure wrapped head to toe in bloody bandages, wandering the coastal highway. The legend follows a familiar pattern. Drivers traveling the road at night sometimes glance into their rearview mirror and see him sitting in the back seat. His body sways with the movement of the car, his face hidden beneath stained wrappings, the stench of death filling the cabin. By the time the driver screeches to a halt, he's gone. Teenagers parking along the cliffs tell their own versions. A sudden knock at the window, a glimpse of bandages in the dark, a figure rocking the car with unnatural strength. Some say he leaves behind a trace of blood, a foul odor, or nothing at all except the memory of terror. Unlike other vanishing hitchhikers, the Bandage Man has a cruel edge. He doesn't ask for a ride or wait by the roadside. He intrudes. He forces himself into your space, a grotesque passenger who rides until he chooses to vanish. Where the story began is uncertain. Some trace it back to the 1950s, passed among teenagers as a way to put fear into late-night drives. Others believe it has older roots, tied to logging accidents or prisoners who once worked the rugged coast. But no matter its origin, the Bandage Man has become one of Oregon's most persistent legends. Of course, it could be nothing more than a campfire tale, fueled by imagination and the natural eeriness of Oregon's fog-shrouded highways. But those who've heard footsteps approaching their car in the dark, or caught a glimpse of bandages where no one should be, will tell you the story is not so easily dismissed. The coast is beautiful by day, but at night the fog rolls in, the ocean roars below, and the road seems narrower than it should. And if you find yourself alone on that stretch near Cannon Beach, check your back seat. The Bandage Man is said to ride with those who least expect it. In the dark back roads of western Pennsylvania, drivers whisper about a faceless figure who walks the night. Some call him the Green Man. Others know him as Charlie No-Face. The legend tells of a man who lost his face in a terrible accident. His skin burned away, his features melted beyond recognition. They say he wanders lonely stretches of highway, glowing faintly with an unnatural green light, scaring anyone unlucky enough to cross his path. Many stories place him along Route 351, or near the abandoned railway tunnels outside Pittsburgh. Some describe him as a ghost of an electrical worker who died after being struck by a live wire, doomed to stalk the night roads forever, crackling with leftover energy. But the truth is more complicated. The legend grew from a real man named Raymond Robinson. In 1919, when he was just a boy, Raymond touched a power line and was horribly injured. He survived, but his face was left terribly disfigured. Because of his appearance, he lived much of his life in seclusion, walking the back roads at night to avoid crowds. Over time, rumors twisted his quiet evening walks into something far more sinister. What began as a man coping with tragedy became a ghost story, a faceless phantom, a monster in the dark. To this day, the tale of Charlie No-Face remains one of Pennsylvania's most enduring legends, a haunting reminder of how easily fact can blur into folklore. In the quiet town of Exeter, Rhode Island, lies a cemetery with a story so strange it blurs the line between folklore and history. It is the tale of Mercy Brown, remembered today as New England's last vampire. The story begins in the late 1800s, when the Brown family was struck by tuberculosis. George Brown lost his wife first, then his eldest daughter. Soon after, his daughter Mercy fell ill as well. In that time, before medicine had answers, fear gave birth to superstition. Neighbors began to whisper that the family was cursed, that something unnatural was feeding on them from beyond the grave. Suspicion turned to Mercy. Though she had died in January of 1892, her body was interred in the cold crypt of the cemetery, rather than the earth, waiting for the ground to thaw. When spring came, the townsfolk exhumed her coffin. To their shock, her body appeared unnaturally preserved. Her skin still had color. Her hair and nails seemed intact. In their eyes, this was proof. Mercy was no longer dead. She was a vampire. What happened next sealed the legend. The villagers cut out her heart and lungs, burned them to ash, and mixed the remains into a tonic. They gave it to Mercy's brother, Edwin, hoping it would cure him of the sickness that still consumed him. It did not. Edwin died soon after. But the story of Mercy Brown was immortalized. To modernize, the explanation is simple. The cold of winter preserved her body. The signs, mistaken for vampirism, were nothing more than the natural effects of decay slowed by frost. But in an era when tuberculosis was called consumption, when families wasted away, pale and gaunt as if something drained them, the vampire was not a myth. It was an answer. Mercy's grave can still be visited today, her headstone often covered in tokens left by those who remember her story. Skeptics see it as nothing more than a relic of ignorance, but to others, it is a reminder of how fear shapes belief, and how quickly tragedy can become legend. The people of Exeter believed they were fighting a monster. Instead, they created one. In the swamps of Lee County, South Carolina, there is a story that slithered out of the water in the summer of 1988 and has refused to sink back since. It is the tale of a creature both bizarre and terrifying. They call it the Lizard Man of Scapore Swamp. The first sighting came from a teenager named Christopher Davis. Driving home late one night, he stopped near the swamp to change a flat tire. As he worked, he heard a noise. Heavy footsteps, something moving through the dark. When he looked up, he saw it. A creature taller than any man, covered in green, scaly skin, with glowing red eyes and 3 long fingers ending in claws. It lunged at him, scratching at his car, chasing as he sped away in terror. In the weeks that followed, more reports came in. Cars parked near the swamp were found clawed and mangled. Livestock turned up dead, their bodies marked by deep gashes. Witnesses described the same thing again and again. A reptilian monster, part man, part lizard, moving with speed and strength no human could match. News of the lizard man spread quickly. Reporters descended on the small town of Bishopville, and soon the story became national. Sightings multiplied. Some swore they saw him cross the road in front of their cars, others that they heard his guttural growl echoing through the swamp at night. The legend grew so large that hunters and thrill-seekers armed themselves, hoping to claim proof, or a trophy. Skeptics, of course, had their explanations. They called it a bear, a misidentified animal, or simply hysteria fueled by publicity. Others suggested it was a hoax, designed to draw attention to a struggling town. But those who saw the claw marks on metal, who heard the testimony of frightened locals, remain unconvinced. The lizard man has become more than a story. He is part of the identity of the region, appearing on t-shirts, souvenirs, and even as the subject of festivals. And though the original wave of sightings has faded, the swamp still carries his name, and his legend still flickers in the imagination of anyone who drives past those shadowed waters. Every state has its monsters, but few have made such a leap from backroad terror to national fascination. The lizard man may never be proven, but in the swamps of South Carolina, his shadow still lingers. They say that on the Pine Ridge Reservation, when the night grows heavy and the wind cuts through the trees, a shadow walks among them, a tall, impossibly thin figure, stretching nearly 7 feet high, his long arms swaying just above the ground. He's called Walking Sam. Some say he's a spirit, others a curse, a being drawn to sadness, to those who carry too much weight on their hearts. People whisper that he moves in silence, his face hidden, his shape barely seen until it's far too close. The old stories tell that Walking Sam doesn't shout or chase. He doesn't need to. He only appears when the air feels hopeless, when the night itself feels tired. And if you listen closely, they say you can hear him whispering, not words but thoughts, soft and poisonous, the kind that echo in your mind and make you doubt the dawn will ever come. Some elders say he's a warning, a story born to keep people from wandering alone into despair. Others swear they've seen him for real, tall and still at the edge of the forest, waiting just beyond the circle of firelight, and when they turned back, he was gone. Whether spirit, legend, or mirror of something darker inside us, Walking Sam remains part of Pine Ridge's shadowed lore, a name spoken in low voices, and a reminder that sometimes the scariest monsters don't live in the woods, they live in silence. In the rolling hills of Adams, Tennessee, lies a farm once home to the Bell family. What happened there in the early 1800s remains one of the strangest and most terrifying hauntings in American history. It is remembered as the Bell Witch. The story begins in 1817, when John Bell, the head of the household, encountered a strange creature in his fields. Some said it looked like a dog with a rabbit's head, others that it was something unearthly altogether. Soon after, the family began to hear scratching at the walls of their cabin, faint whispers in the night, and knocking that grew louder with each passing day. The disturbances escalated quickly. Blankets were ripped from beds. Children were slapped by invisible hands. Furniture moved on its own, and the whispers became a voice, a woman's voice, who named herself Kate. She claimed she was the spirit of a neighbor, angry at John Bell, and she made it clear that her mission was to torment the family. Neighbors and curious onlookers flocked to the Bell farm, and many swore they witnessed the phenomena firsthand. The spirit carried on conversations, predicted events, and mocked those who tried to confront her. Even General Andrew Jackson, who visited the farm with his men, reportedly left in haste after the witch displayed her power. The Bell Witch's hatred for John Bell grew relentless. Over years of torment, his health deteriorated, and in 1820 he died. Many believed the witch had poisoned him, finally fulfilling her promise to kill the man she despised. After his death, the activity subsided, though the legend never did. To this day, stories persist of strange sounds, ghostly figures, and unexplainable events near the old Bell property. The cave on the land, known as the Bell Witch Cave, remains a site of fascination and fear. Skeptics argue the haunting was a tale exaggerated by gossip and superstition. Others see it as a morality story, passed through generations of Tennesseans. But for those who believe, the Bell Witch is more than legend. She is proof that spirits can speak, that anger can linger, and that some grudges do not die. The Bell Witch has become Tennessee's most enduring ghost. Her name still whispered as a warning. Be careful whom you cross, for the dead may not rest quietly. In Denton County, Texas, there is an iron bridge that spans Hickory Creek, rusted with age and swallowed by woods. Officially, it is called the Old Alton Bridge, but no one remembers it that way. To locals, it has only one name: Goatman's Bridge. The legend begins in the 1930s with a man named Oscar Washburn. He was a black goat farmer who lived near the bridge, known for his honesty and for raising the finest goats in the county. People came from miles around for his herd, and they began to call him the Goat Man. But success often breeds resentment. Late one night, members of the Ku Klux Klan stormed his farm. They dragged Washburn to the bridge, tied a noose around his neck, and hurled him into the dark waters below. When they looked over the side, expecting to see his body, the rope hung empty. Washburn was gone. Furious and afraid, they returned to his home and slaughtered his family. From that night on, the bridge was never the same. Travelers reported seeing a horned figure with glowing eyes standing in the woods. Some heard hoofbeats echoing across the planks when no one was there. Others claimed to feel unseen hands pushing them, or the stench of death filling the air. And those who dared to call out Goatman at midnight sometimes saw him appear. A towering figure, part man, part beast, consumed by rage. Goatman's Bridge became a place of dares and nightmares. Teenagers flocked there, daring each other to summon the spirit. Paranormal investigators brought their cameras and left with stories of growls, shadows, and equipment failing without cause. Some claimed to see the Goatman himself, horned, monstrous, a twisted echo of the man whose life was stolen. Skeptics argue it is nothing more than folklore, a cautionary tale tied to the bridge's eerie isolation. But others believe the legend carries the weight of truth, that the cruelty of what was done there left behind a scar too deep to heal. Goatman's Bridge still stands, silent among the trees, its iron frame rusted and its reputation darker than the waters below. Whether you see it as a story of injustice or as proof of a haunting born in blood, one thing is certain: some bridges never let go of the past. On the border of Utah and Idaho lies Bear Lake, a place of blue water and rolling mountains that seems as peaceful as a painting. But beneath its surface, according to legend, dwells a creature that has haunted the region for centuries. They call it the Bear Lake Monster. Long before settlers arrived, the Shoshone and Ute people told stories of a great serpent that lived in the lake. It was said to rise from the depths to snatch deer, elk, and even people from the shore, pulling them under in a violent splash. Warriors spoke of seeing its long, scaly body cutting through the water like a massive snake, its head broad and fearsome, its cry echoing across the valley. When Mormon pioneers reached Bear Lake in the 1860s, they began to report similar encounters. Entire groups claimed to see the monster swimming near their boats, or rolling its enormous body above the waves before disappearing into the depths. Some said it had a head like a cow. Others compared it to a giant fish or crocodile. But all agreed on one thing: it was far too large to be natural. The reports spread quickly, carried by newspapers and word of mouth. Travelers came in hopes of seeing the beast, and locals passed down accounts of cattle dragged into the water, or boats nearly overturned by something powerful below. Over time, the stories shifted. Some witnesses swore it had blazing red eyes. Others claimed it was nearly 60 feet long, and some said it moved so fast through the lake that no man could hope to catch it. Whether one creature or many, the Bear Lake Monster became part of the landscape, as real to some as the mountains surrounding it. The legend has never faded. Fishermen still tell of losing nets to something unseen. Swimmers whisper of being brushed by something large in the deep. And on certain nights, when the lake is still, some say you can hear an unearthly cry drifting across the water. The Bear Lake Monster may be a myth, but it is one rooted in both native tradition and frontier folklore. Two worlds that rarely agreed on much, yet both swore there was something alive in those waters. In the small town of Northfield, Vermont, there is a story that sounds like it belongs in a nightmare. It is not of a ghost, nor of a monster from the deep, but of something caught between man and beast. They call it the Pig Man. The legend begins in 1951, when a local teenager named Sam Harris vanished on the night before Halloween. Some say he went into the woods to cause mischief. Others believe he was drawn there by something darker. What is certain is that he was never seen again. But soon after, strange sightings began. People claimed to see a figure wandering the hills near town, a man-sized creature with the body of a human, but the face of a pig. His skin was pale, his eyes gleamed red in the dark, and he moved with a speed that seemed unnatural. Farmers reported livestock torn apart, not by wolves or coyotes, but with a violence that seemed deliberate. Travelers on back roads swore they saw him lurking at the tree line, watching from the shadows. Children whispered of hearing grunts and squeals outside their windows at night, followed by heavy footsteps in the yard. Some believe the pigman was Sam Harris himself, transformed by whatever he found in the woods that October night. Others think he was a feral man who wore the severed head of a pig as a mask, hiding his humanity as he prowled the countryside. And still others insist he was no man at all, but a creature born of old New England folklore, a spirit of chaos come to life. The pigman has been tied to a place known as the Devil's Wash Bowl, a rugged ravine outside Northfield. Locals say it is his home, and those who dare to visit after dark sometimes find strange footprints or the carcasses of animals left behind. Brave teenagers venture there on dares, and more than a few return shaken, claiming they heard grunting in the brush or saw a pale figure darting between the trees. The legend has endured for more than 70 years, because whether the pigman is a beast, a spirit, or simply a story, something about Northfield's dark woods still feels wrong. Just outside Fairfax, Virginia, there is a narrow, one-lane tunnel beneath a railroad track. By day it looks ordinary enough, but at night, locals say it belongs to a legend, a figure both bizarre and terrifying. They call him the Bunny Man. The story began in the 1970s, when reports surfaced of a man dressed in a rabbit costume, wielding an axe. In one account, a couple parked near the tunnel saw him smash their car window while screaming at them to leave. In another, construction workers claimed he threatened them, warning they were trespassing on his land. From those encounters, the legend grew. Teenagers whispered that the Bunny Man was an escaped convict from an asylum, hiding in the woods, feeding on rabbits, and leaving their skinned bodies hanging from trees. Others said he graduated from animals to people, dragging victims to the tunnel where only blood and bones remained. The tunnel itself, now called Bunny Man Bridge, became the heart of the story. Daring each other to visit at midnight on Halloween, locals claimed you could hear footsteps in the gravel, or see a man in tattered white with ears rising from his head, waiting in the shadows. Some swore they heard scratching on their cars, or the distant echo of laughter that didn't belong to anyone living. What makes the Bunny Man so enduring is not just the absurdity of the image, a man in a rabbit suit with an axe, but the unease it stirs. He is part prankster, part boogeyman, part slasher villain, and the line between the real man and the monster has long since blurred. The Bunny Man may never be proven, but Bunny Man Bridge still draws crowds every year. Some come to laugh, others to tremble, and some to listen for the sound of footsteps on the tracks above, waiting for a figure in white to step out of the dark. In the small town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, the year 1966 brought with it a series of sightings that would turn a local legend into one of the most famous mysteries in the world. The creature was described as tall, winged, and inhuman, with glowing red eyes that burned through the night. They called it the Mothman. The first report came from two young couples driving near an abandoned munitions plant known as the TNT area. They saw a figure larger than a man standing in the road, its wings unfolded, spanning nearly 10 feet, and it rose into the air, following their car at impossible speeds. Terrified, they raced to the police, and their story sparked a frenzy. In the months that followed, more than 100 people claimed to see the creature. Sometimes it was perched on rooftops, sometimes gliding silently over the river, and sometimes staring into the windows of homes with those blazing red eyes. Witnesses described feelings of dread, of a presence that seemed to weigh on them even after the creature was gone. Then came the tragedy. On December 15th, 1967, the silver bridge connecting Point Pleasant to Ohio collapsed, killing 46 people. In the aftermath, many linked the disaster to the sightings of the Mothman. Some believed the creature had come as a warning of impending doom. Others thought it was a harbinger of death itself, appearing only before catastrophe struck. The Mothman was never captured, never explained. But its legend grew far beyond West Virginia. Books, movies, and documentaries spread the story across the world, turning Point Pleasant into a place of pilgrimage for believers and curiosity seekers. Even today, the town celebrates its most infamous resident with a statue and an annual festival. For those who saw it, there is no doubt. Something walked and flew through Point Pleasant in those dark months of 1966. Whether it was monster, omen, or something stranger still, the Mothman left behind a shadow that is never lifted. On the quiet back roads outside Elkhorn, Wisconsin, locals whisper of something stalking the fields and tree lines. It is not man, nor is it wolf, but something caught in between. They call it the Beast of Bray, Rhode. The first reports came in the late 1980s. Drivers claimed to see a massive, fur-covered creature crouched by the roadside, its eyes glowing in their headlights. It was larger than any dog, standing upright like a man, with claws that dug into the dirt. Some said it tore at roadkill with its hands before turning to glare at them, with a look that was far too intelligent. As sightings grew, so did the fear. Farmers reported livestock mutilations, animals found ripped open with no clear predator to blame. Children swore they saw the beast following them through the cornfields, moving silently, its shape towering above the stalks. Others claimed it chased their cars, keeping pace with terrifying speed before vanishing back into the woods. Descriptions matched again and again. A creature 6 to 7 feet tall, covered in shaggy hair, with the head of a wolf or dog and the body of a man. A werewolf, some said. A skinwalker, others whispered. But in Wisconsin it became simply the Beast. The legend might have remained local, but in the early 1990s, journalist Linda Godfrey investigated the reports. Her articles, and later her books, brought national attention. Soon, Bray Road was crawling with investigators, monster hunters, and thrill seekers, all hoping to glimpse the creature for themselves. Those who saw the beast described the terror in detail, the way it moved, the way it stared, not like an animal, but like something that knew it was being watched. Today, the Beast of Bray Road is part of Wisconsin's identity, a legend as much as a warning. Drive down that stretch of road on a foggy night, and you may feel the same prickling unease that so many before you have described. Because the fields are wide, the woods are deep, and some hunters are not meant to be seen. Along the Platte River in Wyoming, there is a legend of a ghostly vessel that glides through the mist. It is not made of wood or steel, nor does it belong to any sailor or captain. They call it the phantom ship of the Platte River, and to see it is to know death is near. The first stories date back to the mid-1800s, when trappers and pioneers pushed west along the river's banks. They told of a strange sight on cold, foggy days, a sailing ship appearing on the water, its masts high, its sails gray and tattered. The Platte is far too shallow for such a craft, but the vision was clear. The ship would glide silently over the current, glowing faintly in the mist. Witnesses swore that as the phantom drew closer, they could see figures on its deck. Sailors hunched and shadowed, their faces hidden. At the center of the deck lay something even stranger. A single figure shrouded in cloth, stretched out as though in death. The stories claim that the figure would reveal itself to the watcher, and when it did, the vision always came true. A trapper who saw the face of his bride-to-be soon learned she had died of fever. A ranch hand glimpsed the features of his father, only to hear days later that the man had passed. Again and again, those who saw the ship said it carried the image of someone they loved, a warning that death was already on its way. The legend of the phantom ship spread through the frontier, a story whispered by campfires along the trail. It was never seen often, only on rare days when the mist was thick and the river ran silent. But its reputation grew. To see it was to know loss. The Platte River still runs cold, and the mist still rises. And on certain mornings when the fog clings low and the water gleams pale, there are those who swear they have seen a shadow of sails drifting where no ship should ever be. The phantom ship of the Platte River may never carry cargo or crew, but it carries something far heavier. The promise that every voyage, sooner or later, must reach its end. Thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed these tales. If you enjoy the unknown, the urban legends, and the unsolved mysteries, then follow Archive X for more. And let me know in the comments what you'd like to hear about next. Until next time, stay curious and stay cautious. The night has a way of whispering secrets to those who listen.